Welcome to this tutorial. My name is Ian and I'm going to be taking you through the tutorial. In this tutorial we're going to build on what we did in the previous tutorial. So in the previous tutorial we created a pivot table from all our Excel spreadsheet data that we had. So in this tutorial we're going to see how we can build on that using our rows, columns and values. You're going to see that we can build very sophisticated pivot tables very quickly. Please note that this is part of a series of tutorials that we're doing on Excel Online pivot tables. So please make sure to look out for the other pivot tables. Also, please make sure to like and subscribe to our channel to keep up to date with all our latest videos. Having said all of that, let's jump into the tutorial and I will see you there. Welcome to this tutorial. In this tutorial, we're going to continue to see how we can get some more sophistication with our pivot tables. So you would have seen in the previous tutorial how we easily created a pivot table by taking all our data and converting it into pivot tables. So now that we've got our list of fields, we can now use those fields to be able to create our summarized and aggregated tables. Okay, so we're going to now continue to use this information. So let's say, for example, now we get our region and we drop it into our rows. You'll remember that from the previous tutorial. We'll just drop it in there. And then what happens is we get a listing of all the unique regions that are in the dataset. So that's now currently showing us that there's 4 unique regions out of the 8,400 rows that we were using for our source data. Again, if you haven't seen the previous tutorial, please go back to that tutorial to see the source data that we're working with. Okay, what we could then do was we could then take our sales, drop that into our values, and you'll remember then by automatically it just summed up the sales. So we got our total sales for each of our regions, and we were able to see what the sum of sales was for each region. Now you'll see here that mine is nicely formatted. However, the first time that you do this, you'll have to just highlight all of your cells in the pivot table, just highlight all the value cells. And then what you do is you go across to your formatting. Remember, it's just on the home menu. Go across to your formatting. In this case, I'm using my 1000 separator. So I'm going to click on the comma. And then I'm going to use my decimals. And I'm going to decrease the number of decimals because I don't want any decimals in here. So that's basically how I formatted these numbers. Okay, so once I've got my sum of sales nicely formatted, I've got my regions, and as we saw in the previous tutorial, we could then have nice looking reports. However, what if you wanted a bit more sophistication here? What if you wanted to add another field? Let's say, for example, we had our product category. Now, let's say we wanted now that to go across in our columns. So you can see again, I can just click and pick that up, and I can now bring that across to my columns, drop it into my columns, and now we get each of the product categories going across in the columns. So you can see in the data set, we've got 3 unique product categories. And what it's done now is it's created a permutation of each of my regions and each of my product categories. And it's now calculated for each one of those permutations what the sum of the sales is. You'll also see that I get my totals. So at the bottom here, I get my grand totals for each of my different product categories. And over here, I get my grand totals for each of my regions. So quite a lot of interesting information there. And as you can see, that was just by picking up and dragging and dropping my product category. Now what you could do is you could actually change the way that this is structured. So you could take your product category and we could actually move that and we could put it under the rows. So you can have more than one field in your rows. Now you'll see when I click and pick this up, that again, I get my line, and you can see currently that the line is underneath the region. However, if I pick this up and I move it up a bit, you would see that it goes above the region. So it becomes quite important where you drop this, because that will dictate where it's going to be shown within your pivot table. So now if I drop it after the region, just let go there, you'll see now I've got region, I've got product category, and let's go across to our pivot table. Now you'll see that my pivot table has actually moved my product category across into my rows. So I now have my region, and then I have my product category, and then I have my sum of sales. So it's basically exactly the same calculation, because obviously the sum of the sales is still the sum of the sales for these values. However, it's showing me this in a different way. Now, when you do have rows, you do get a little bit more features that you can use. Now, one of them is your expand and collapse. So if you go across, you'll see over here, you've got your expand and collapse little buttons, and you can actually collapse all of this. So if you didn't want to see all the detail behind this, then you could just decide to expand one of these, and then you would see the detail, and then you could decide to collapse it. Now, please note on your right click, just using your right click, you get a sensitive, context sensitive menu. So when we right click, you'll see that as we go down, you get the ability to be able to expand and collapse all of the values. So as you can see here, you can expand and collapse one, or you could expand and collapse the entire field. So let's say we want to expand in everything. You'll see everything gets expanded. Let's go back to this field, right click again, go back, and we could collapse the entire field. So very easy to do that with the right click. Now please note that once you've got something in your rows, you could actually add as many values as you wanted to here. So if you wanted to take another value, I'm just thinking of something that doesn't have too much behind it. Fortunately, most of these do. So we're going to see quite a lot of values when I do add this. So let's say I add my customer state. So now you get a third one, customer state. So now you'll see product category and customer state. And again, if I go back and I say I want to expand all of this, you will see that we start to get quite a lot of detail. So there we go. We now get each of the customer states for each of the regions, for each of the product categories. So you can create quite sophisticated pivot tables very, very quickly by building this hierarchy. Now I am going to remove the customer state. For now, it's just a little bit too much information. So let's just remove that field. Just remember, you click on the drop down and then you can remove it. Also, just remember, I could take my product category and I could move that to my columns, and I could change the way that this is being shown. And again, I could add a new field. So if I wanted to, I could take my customer state, I could drop that back into my rows. And you'll see now that I get each of the customer states, each of the regions, each of the product categories. So basically, you are able to add as many fields to the rows and columns as you would like. Okay, what I'm going to move on to now, though, is we're going to talk about the values. So let's have a look at the values. So I'm going to simplify this. I'm going to take customer state out. I'm going to take my product category out. And we're just going to keep with our sum of sales. Now let's say, for example, I wanted to see my sum of sales and my sum of my profit. So we'll drop that in there. So you'll see now that I've actually got two sets of values here, and I've now got the sum of the profit being displayed. So I can actually have more than one value in my pivot table. Also, what I could do is add my order quantity, which is another value field. And you'll see each time it's actually summing this up. Now, in one of the following tutorials, we're going to talk about how we can do different methods of aggregation where you can get averages, you can get min, you can get max, you can get counts. So we've got different ways of being able to count, and we'll show how we can change that here. Now, one of the things that I do want to show you with values is that once you've got more than one value, then you actually get a new field called values that appears in columns. And basically what that's doing is it's managing how the values are being displayed in your column. Now, if we took our product category and we actually dropped it after our values, you'll see now that I get a permutation where it's showing me product category. So what we're doing now, just remember that this shows in order. So we get values and we would get sum of sales, we get sum of profit, and then we get each of our product categories. So you see how the product categories are being displayed on each one. So the order here again makes a lot of difference. If I took product category and I dropped that before my values, you see now you've got product category and then you've got values. Now you'll see that the order changes. So we've got furniture, then we've got sum of sales, sum of profit, sum of order quantity. So the order is quite important as to which way around you have this. Now the last part that I do want to show you in this tutorial is that we can also move this values. So I'm going to take product category out just to make this a bit simpler. So we go back to just having the three fields. Now one of the things that you can do is you can take your values and you can drop it into your rows. So when you drop it there, you'll now see that you have region and then you have the values going down in your rows. Now this is just a different form of presentation, but it can be really useful depending on what types of reports you're showing. If you want to put it back into columns, just take your values, drag it back into columns. So hopefully you've seen in this tutorial, it's really easy to be able to move your fields around between your rows, values, columns, and being able to get different presentations of your data. I'm going to leave you to experiment with that, but hopefully you'll see there's a lot of sophistication you can create from this. Okay, I will see you in the next tutorial.